We're also identifying shocking levels of incompetence and probable fraud in the Social Security program.
Just the low rumble of unmarked federal vehicles positioning quietly outside multiple locations across Texas. Darkness covered the streets as tactical teams moved into place. FBI agents, ICE HSI units, financial crimes investigators, DOJ personnel, digital forensic specialists, all operating under sealed warrants issued only hours earlier. The primary target sat outside Houston. Officially, it was registered as a luxury wellness and rehabilitation facility. But federal analysts now believed the building functioned as a centralized coordination hub. At exactly 4:51 a.m., the entry command was given. Teams breached the front and rear entrances simultaneously. Security systems were disabled within seconds. Internal networks were cut off before any remote deletions could occur. Inside, investigators expected to find financial records. What they discovered instead shocked even veteran agents. Behind several secured interior rooms sat rows of active workstations connected to encrypted routing systems. Live financial dashboards tracked movement across dozens of accounts in real time. Servers processed layered transfers continuously. Wall displays monitored vehicle movement schedules between states. And hidden storage rooms contained stacks of identity documents, licensing files, payment authorizations, and sealed transaction records tied to multiple shell entities. This was not a hidden side operation. It was command infrastructure. A system specifically designed to coordinate movement while remaining invisible inside legitimate business activity. Then investigators found something even worse. A protected internal database. More than 6,000 identity profiles. Duplicate records. Unverified licensing credentials. Temporary employee authorizations reused across multiple businesses. Some identities appeared connected to financial movement. Others appeared linked to transportation coordination. And several records matched individuals already under investigation in unrelated trafficking cases across multiple states. That discovery changed the operation instantly. Federal agents no longer believed they were looking at isolated fraud. They were standing inside a network supporting broader criminal infrastructure. As forensic teams continued examining the servers, transaction pathways began expanding beyond Texas. Funds moved through Nevada, Arizona, Florida, Illinois, California. Then disappeared into offshore routing systems layered behind consulting contracts and logistics firms. The structure was engineered to survive scrutiny. Every layer protected the next. And every participant only saw a fraction of the system. By 6:02 a.m., additional warrants were activated across 4 states. Simultaneous raids began targeting connected facilities identified during overnight forensic analysis. Storage warehouses, office buildings, payment processing companies, transportation hubs. At multiple sites, investigators recovered encrypted communication devices and independent server clusters operating on isolated backup power systems. This network expected interruption. It was prepared for it. But what investigators uncovered next created an even larger problem. Inside one secured data room, agents discovered internal communications referencing protected review channels. Certain businesses had apparently received advance warning before regulatory inspections. Others had permits approved despite repeated violations. And several communications referenced unnamed officials responsible for maintaining operational continuity. The wording was deliberate. Cold. Professional. This was not corruption happening around the system. It was operating through it. By 7:18 a.m., the first arrests began. Not low-level employees. System coordinators. Financial intermediaries. Transport managers. Licensing consultants. Several individuals taken into custody possessed authorized access credentials connected to state-level processing systems. Which meant investigators' worst suspicions were now becoming reality. Parts of the infrastructure had likely been protected internally for years. Asset seizure teams moved immediately. Bank accounts were frozen. Digital wallets secured. Properties seized under emergency financial intervention orders. Within hours, millions of dollars in connected assets had been locked down. And for the first time in years, the movement stopped. The transfers halted. The routing chains failed. The operational rhythm investigators had tracked for nearly a year suddenly disappeared. But even as the network began collapsing, forensic analysts noticed something unusual. One isolated data cluster remained active after the primary shutdown. Inside it was a secondary archive. Not transaction logs. Not payment records. Names. Dozens of them. Individuals connected not to operating the network, but protecting it. Administrative officials. Regulatory contacts. Contract approval managers. People positioned close enough to ensure the system continued functioning without interference. And at that moment, the investigation changed again. Because federal authorities realized the operation had not survived through secrecy alone. It had survived through structural protection. By midday, dozens of individuals were in custody. Multiple businesses had been shut down. Transportation routes disrupted. Millions in assets frozen. But investigators knew the deeper issue remained unresolved. Because networks this sophisticated are never built overnight. They evolve slowly. Quietly adapting inside systems people already trust. And as investigators reviewed the original event that triggered the operation. The black van entering the parking lot at 2:11 a.m. They discovered something unexpected. The vehicle itself had not been the mistake. The route had. For the first time in nearly 2 years, one transport sequence failed to synchronize perfectly with the system's timing structure. Just a few missing minutes. A single movement inconsistency. Enough for surveillance software to notice the anomaly. Enough to reopen an archived investigation. Enough to expose everything that followed. Which raised a final question investigators could no longer ignore. If one timing error exposed an entire hidden network operating across multiple states, how many others are still functioning perfectly? Without anyone noticing at all. At 2:11 a.m., a routine surveillance camera captured something investigators almost ignored. A black transport van entered the rear parking area of a licensed wellness facility outside Houston, Texas. No employees were scheduled to be there. No deliveries had been authorized. And according to business records, the building had officially closed more than 4 hours earlier. At first, the movement didn't seem important. The vehicle stayed for only 11 minutes. Then it disappeared. But when analysts reviewed nearby traffic cameras, they noticed something unusual. The van never appeared leaving the district. It entered the area. But it never came back out. That inconsistency triggered a quiet review. Not because of the van itself. But because 18 months earlier, investigators had documented a nearly identical anomaly connected to a separate financial investigation that abruptly collapsed before charges were ever filed. At the time, the evidence went nowhere. The businesses involved appeared legitimate. The transactions were clean. The ownership records checked out. And every attempt to follow the money ended the same way. The trail vanished. So the case was archived. Until now. When analysts reopened the old files, the similarities were impossible to ignore. Same operational structure. Same late-night movement patterns. Same sequence of small financial transfers routed through layered shell entities. But this time, something had changed. The operation was larger. Cleaner. More organized. Whoever controlled the system had refined it. Which meant one thing. The network investigators thought had disappeared. Had never actually stopped operating. It had expanded. Quietly. And without detection. No public investigation was announced. No warrants were issued. No media coverage appeared. Instead, a small federal review unit was assembled under internal authorization. Their assignment was simple. Do not follow where the money ends. Follow how it moves. And that decision changed the entire investigation. Because the transfers were not random. They behaved like circulation. Small amounts moving continuously through wellness businesses, payment processors, consulting firms, transportation accounts, and temporary holding companies. Each transfer appeared harmless alone. But together, they formed a controlled pathway. A hidden financial corridor operating beneath legitimate infrastructure. Within weeks, analysts identified over 47 businesses connected indirectly through overlapping payment activity. Massage spas. Import companies. Medical supply firms. Cleaning contractors. Property management groups. Individually, they appeared unrelated. But internally, they shared something unusual. The same legal contacts. The same accounting structures. The same overnight routing windows. And most importantly, the same protected approval patterns. That was the first moment investigators suspected the operation might be receiving internal assistance. Not from street-level participants. From somewhere higher. As surveillance expanded, federal teams began observing unusual activity around several Texas properties connected to the network. Deliveries arriving between midnight and 4 a.m. Vehicles changing license plates inside secured garages. Security systems installed facing outward instead of inward. And employees instructed never to use personal phones inside certain buildings. Everything about the system suggested compartmentalization. Nobody appeared to know the entire operation. Only their specific role inside it. Then came the first major breakthrough. A contractor file connected to one of the businesses contained a name investigators had already seen before. At first, it looked insignificant. Just another administrative approval signature buried inside licensing records. But when analysts cross-referenced older archived investigations, the same name appeared again. And again. In expedited permit approvals. In financial override authorizations. In compliance exemptions. The individual was never directly connected to transactions. But repeatedly connected to access. Access to systems that allowed the operation to continue without interruption. That changed everything. Because networks like this do not survive for years through secrecy alone. They survive through protection. And protection at that level meant the operation was likely embedded deeper than investigators originally believed. By month 9 of the investigation, operational irregularities began accelerating. Businesses connected to the network showed revenue increases that made no commercial sense. Some locations reported customer activity nearly triple the physical capacity of their buildings. Others processed unusually high volumes of digital transactions despite appearing nearly empty during daytime surveillance. On paper, the businesses looked successful. In reality, investigators now believed they were functioning as movement hubs. Not for customers. For money. And possibly much more. Then the surveillance teams noticed another pattern. Transport vehicles connected to the network repeatedly traveled between Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and California using indirect highway routes designed to avoid major checkpoints. The timing was precise. The routes rotated constantly. And several vehicles appeared registered to companies that technically did not exist. That level of organization required coordination. Infrastructure. Control. This was no longer a local criminal operation. It was becoming something larger. Something engineered. By month 11, analysts uncovered internal transaction structures moving funds in carefully fragmented sequences. $9,000. $8,600. $9,400. Always below automatic reporting thresholds. always routed through multiple temporary accounts, and always disappearing before reaching a final identifiable destination. Then came the event that triggered federal escalation. Within 72 hours, more than 2,000 structured transfers moved across fewer than 50 originating accounts. The pattern was too coordinated to ignore. This was not automation alone. Someone was actively managing the flow. That's when Federal Command authorized intervention. Not a standard arrest operation. A coordinated multi-agency raid. Because by now, investigators understood something critical. The system was layered. Removing one business would accomplish nothing. The infrastructure itself had to be disrupted simultaneously. At 4:37 a.m., movement began. No sirens. No public alerts.